Hi, good morning. My name is SavannahBarr, and I'm 17 and a senior at Spruce Creek, so that makes my graduating class 2022. I am in the IB program in the Academy of Finance at Spruce Creek. And since we're talking about college, after high school, I plan on attending university. Which one is still at question. Family discussions have not been confirmed. And I've been in this youth group since 7th grade. And this is where I began finding myself in faith, and how that happened we'll talk about later. But let's just do a little bit of a backstory. I grew up going to VBS with my aunt in Tallahassee. I loved the songs, and we got to do crafts, and there were always fun themes, and I got to be with my cousins. It was always one of my favorite parts of the summer. And while they always had the stories and I understood them, I wouldn't really say that I grew a strong faith there. And also in 3rd grade, my family started going to a church around here, but I never really felt welcomed or encouraged to grow my faith there. Here was kind of a place where the youth group had a lot of cliques, and they weren't very encouraging for me. Then in 7th grade, Alyssa, Pastor Tom's daughter, invited me to go to a lock-in, the middle school lock-in, and I wasn't expecting much. It was kind of just something to do because it was the end of school, and I think we went go-karting or ice skating. I'm not too sure, but after that I just found myself coming back. I'm not really sure how, or I know at first it was probably because Alyssa was coming, so I was coming, and I was hesitant to keep coming on my own and do this on my own, because in my last church, like I said, you kind of had to grow up in the church to be accepted. So obviously I had some hesitations because I didn't want to be pushed out because I'd never grew up in this church. But then I began finding myself. I took steps on my own. I began to come on my own. I chose to be here even if Alyssa wasn't there. I chose to be part of the youth group. I even got involved. I'm a student leader. So I would definitely say that in this youth group and because of this church, I began taking steps to find myself in God. For me, being you and God means understanding that God has a plan for me. He has given me gifts and puts me in the places He needs me to be in so that I can find my passions and find who He wants me to be. When I know that God has a plan for me, I always look to my favorite verse, Jeremiah 29:11. And it says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." As we can see that God, He wants us to prosper, and He wants us to have a bright future. And He puts the people and things in our lives to show us where He wants us to be. And so being you means being the you that God wants you to be, or He calls you to be. And while this can be scary to have to follow a plan, and we might really not know the plan, we just have to trust in God. And God has given us the gifts and the ability to get through the plan, follow His plan. In the Bible, we can look at Gideon, and we see a man who God called to lead his people from out of discrimination. He questioned God and he tested God. In Judges 7:15 through 22, we see Gideon testing the Lord, and he says, Pardon me, my Lord," Gideon replied, "but how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest of Manasseh, and I am the least in my family." The Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites, leaving none alive." Gideon replied, "If now I have found favor in your eyes, give me a sign that this is really you. Take talking to me. Please do not go away until I come back and bring my offering and set it before you." And the Lord said, "I will wait until you return." Gideon went inside, prepared a young goat, and from an ephah of flour he made bread without yeast. Putting the meat in a basket and its broth in a pot, he brought them out and offered them to him under the yoke. The angel of God said to him, "Take the meat and the unleavened bread, place them on this rock, and pour out the broth." And Gideon did so. The angel of the Lord touched the meat and the unleavened bread with the tip of his staff that was in his hand. Fire flared from the rock, consuming the meat and the bread, and the angel of the Lord disappeared. When Gideon realized that it was the angel of the Lord, he exclaimed, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face." So we see that God has a plan for Gideon, and Gideon questions it, but God proves Himself, and He proves Himself to us all the time. And Gideon After he realized that that the angel of the Lord was the angel of the Lord, and that he was calling him to lead. But that doesn't mean that God just gave him the victory or the win for his people. God cut Gideon's army in half before giving the enemy an advantage. But the gifts that God gave Gideon allowed him to bring his people to victory. He had the military leadership and he could discover himself through God from these gifts. And so with the gifts that God gave him and his smart tactics, Gideon did end up bringing his people from under the Midianites. For me, the passions that God has called me to, I believe, have changed. I've matured personally and spiritually. I realized that what I thought were my passions were not what actually are my passions. At one time, I saw myself dancing all the time, and I really thought it was a passion of mine. I've even danced here on Youth Sunday. But as I've gotten older, I don't know if it's just me falling out of dance or God calling me and making me realize that I have other passions has made me realize that I'm not really a dancer. I like dancing, but it's not what I want to do. But I had a God moment when I went on a school trip to the Dominican. It wasn't a mission trip, it was a school trip, but it was a service project. There we worked with a group of girls in the Mariposa Foundation, and this is a place where their mission is to end the cyclical poverty by starting with the girls. And so on this trip, we worked hands-on with the girls, and we also worked painting the center. There's a picture of us. We painted that mural, and there's another one that should come up. That's a picture of me and one of the girls there. And I think I had a realization probably when I came back more than anything, because I realized that we have a lot more in the United States than they do. This is when I really felt a calling that I have, is that I want to help those in developing and impoverished nations. And this is where in college, I want to study international affairs and help promote the support of those in developing nations who don't have the rights or the resources that we do. And for me, this is the plan that I feel God calling me to. I want to show God's love by helping others. And each one of us have different passions and different callings that allow us to be who we are meant to be in God. Many times we hear the world tell us that being you means accepting who you are and accepting your physical appearance. And of course I support that because we're all made in God's image. I think that being you is more than just your clothes or your material items. This doesn't make you you, it's your heart that makes you you. In 1 Samuel 16:7, it says, "But the Lord said to Samuel, 'Do not consider his appearance or his height, for I have rejected him.' The Lord does not look at the things people look at. People look at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart." So God sees us and who we're meant to be because of our heart. Our heart is who we are. So I encourage everyone to listen to what God is calling you and to follow your passions, because this is what can make you the best you in God. Thank you.